hymns, and also for such a friend, for such a friend. And what I'm trying to say now, when we see the word crisis, I don't have to define it because every one of you understand it, right? So throughout the lifetime, we go through so many crises, and every time we go through a new crisis, it feels like it's even more difficult than the previous ones. Even though, when you compare them, you'll notice that the crisis that you had 10 years ago was life and death situation. But when we go through them, it feels like there is none like this. How important is to have a friend next to it? Some crises, you go through them and you'll notice that friends could not help, family could not help. The only safety or the only hope you have is God. And I'm not going to talk a lot about crisis. I want to bring just a positive note, because when we talk about the final crisis, that means that is the last one that we will face on this earth. The book of Revelation tells us the events just prior to the second coming of Christ. And the positive note or the promise that I want to share with you, we know that in chapter 6 of Revelation, the last verse, there is a question. I don't know if you remember the question. It says, "Who shall be able to stand?" The next chapter, chapter 7, tells us the people that are able to stand, those that are sealed. Chapter 14 again, the people who will be able to stand, they are sealed. Do you know what's the next chapter, chapter 15? Chapter 15 and chapter 16 introduces the last plagues that will be poured upon the earth. And the positive note that I want to share here, "And I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of God." So this is the final crisis for this earth in a way. "And I saw, as it were, a sea of glass mingled with fire, and them that had gotten the victory over the beast and over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass, having the harps of God." And now, do you remember the question, who shall be able to stand? So as you look here in this verse, who is able to stand? Those that gotten the victory over the beast, over the image, over the mark, over the number of his name stand. And while they are standing, they have something in their hands. What is that? What do you do with harps? Play or sing or be happy. Now, can you be happy in the midst of trials? Can you be happy in the midst of crisis? And it says that they sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, "Great and marvelous are thy works, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are thy ways, thou King of saints." So this is the beautiful promise that I want to start with this morning. Because when we go to crisis, what makes you fight? Usually we look at the outcome of it. If it's worth, we fight. If it's not worth it, we give up in the midst of the crisis. And I'm sure that it happened to you many times. You have a target, and it doesn't matter. Like, for example, a family. The father goes through so many trials sometimes just to bring bread for his children to be happy. Looking at the outcome makes us be victorious or makes us give up. And another thought that I'm thinking of, every time when we see a beautiful picture, we need to remember that there was behind scenes a huge crisis. You see a nice house. How many trials did it take for that house to be built? You see a nice family. And even salvation, we know that salvation is a free gift given for from God to his children. But what did we learn last Sabbath? Did Christ go through a crisis to attain that victory? And do you remember the questions that he had in the Garden of Gethsemane? He says that, Father, if it's thy will, let this cup pass away from me. Was this a crisis? Yes. So there are two great crises that awaits the true Adventist. And one of them is facing the world's plagues. This is man-made plagues. And then to live in the presence of God without a mediator. And to have a better picture, I mentioned already chapter 14 is the chapter of people that are able to stand, the character of those people. They are being sealed. In chapter 15 and 16, we see the 7 last plagues that are being poured, and also to live in the presence of God without a mediator. But do you remember what is the chapter before 14? Because here we talk about the crisis that awaits the Adventist, in a way. Chapter 13 tells us that starts with a beast, the first beast, and we know that beast represents power, according to prophecy. And the first beast is identified as the papal Rome that persecutes the faithful for 1,260 years. And do you know how many people or how many followers of Christ were killed during this time? Yes, about more than 50 millions. So that was the first beast. And this chapter 13 is a copy of chapter 7 of Daniel, because it says that it speaks blasphemies against God, persecutes the faithful, and even martyrs them. And then the second beast, it says that it's a lamb-like beast. You see a different characteristic here? It's a lamb-like beast and speaks like a dragon. Gives the previous beast all the power that the previous beast lost. And we are not going to talk much about history of the first beast, but I want to have it clear about the second one, because this is the time that we live in. And as I mentioned about, there are men's plagues and God's plagues. The first plagues that will be, that the true Adventists will go through, it's chapter 13 of Revelation. And we will explain this a little more in a little bit. But when you look at this, the men's plagues, and we know that there will be a death decree, they cannot sell or buy. And when you look at God's plagues, which one of them would you like to suffer? Because we can choose. Either we choose men's plagues and be able to sing when God's plagues are given, or we choose the last ones and be comfortable when chapter 13 takes place in this world. So every one of us can think about this. Now let's go further. So I mentioned Revelation 13. In verse 11, starts mentioning about, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So when you think about this, we identify it in Bible prophecy as the New World, or America. And to give you some clues on that, we see that it comings up, the Greek word coming up meaning coming like a plant. And do you know the plants, how they come out? A little seed having such strength to pierce the earth. Yes. And then it grows fast, right? And then here we see that it's coming out of the earth. So this is a difference from the other beasts, because the other world powers, when we look at Daniel, and also I mentioned in chapter 13, the first beast, they are coming out of sea. And sea in the Bible, prophecy is people who are already inhabited land. But this time, This one is coming out of Earth, meaning it's not a very populated area. And also, I'm just thinking about, children, how fast do they grow? I remember someone last year, they were trying to sell us some baby shoes that are very good quality. They last a long time. So we were thinking about it. Should we buy it? But then we realized even if it lasts 2 years, in 2 months, we need to buy new ones anyway. Yes, because children grow fast, right? So the same, we see a good characteristics here. A lamb like this. A lamb grows fast. And for those of you who know history, do you remember when was this country, um, how can I say, established? Yes, that's not many years ago, right? We don't talk about 321 or AD. I'm sorry, we don't talk about BC, right? We talk about just short time. And in this short time, and when the children grow, they grow in strength and also in what? I mentioned the shoes, right? Even in territory, I would say. And this country, when it was established, was little in a way, but we see that about 27 years later, in 1803, there was a big purchase that the United States did. Do you remember that big purchase? Those Louisiana Purchase. And I looked out, and it looks like it's about 15 modern states that are used from that purchase. Yes, 27 years later, they were able to purchase this big land. And also, that is 91 years later, after it was established, it was another great purchase, which was the Alaska, yes. I'm not going into much details, but I want to point out also, do you remember how much was an acre when they bought it? Because everyone needs to buy land in the country these days. The Louisiana Purchase was about 8 cents an acre. Would you buy? How many acres would you buy with those cents? I'm sure that even Rachel can buy a few acres. Yes. The Alaska Purchase was 2 cents an acre, even cheaper than that. So what I'm trying to say with this, growing fast in territory and power, no needs of wars, is just a blessing of God there, right? In the same time, it says that it had 2 horns like a lamb. And when we think about 2 horns, we can trace this thought all the way to a voice in Judea that says that give to Caesar's what it belongs to Caesar's, and give to God what belongs to God. You remember that voice, right? So what do we understand from that? State and church should be separate. And then we see that even though it looks like a lamb, it comes, the ultimate purpose of this beast is to speak like a dragon. So when we think about the lamb, who is the lamb represented in the Bible? Jesus, the Lamb of God, right? As John looks at Jesus, he says, behold the Lamb. So it has some Christian characteristics. Looks like a lamb, but it's not a lamb, right? And it speaks like a dragon. Who's the dragon if Jesus is the lamb? Yeah. The devil. We see that in Revelation. It says that old serpent, the dragon, which is Satan, right? So it speaks like the dragon. And at some point in history, we should expect a turning point, right? First, we see the blessing of God, and then this lamb transforms itself into where it has the voice of the dragon. And there are a few dates here that I made note of, and maybe you may agree with me when I say 9/11, because it was a change in security from that time on. Then you think about 2020, they were testing a global shutdown, right? Everywhere was listening to what the beast was saying, in other words. And recently, with the events going on, we see a religious war. In the name of religion, they persecute people in a way. And probably you are aware of how many people lost their jobs because they were happy when someone died. Yes, I'm not saying that we should be happy when people die, we're not. But we are talking about the freedom of speech here, right? In the name of religion, people lose their jobs. People are even sent out of the country in the name of religion. And then, so we say that it will speak like a dragon. And if we look at the next verses, it says that will cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Can you see that in America? It's impossible in a way. When you see a Christian country to kill someone for their worship. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Many, looking at this Christian country, as I mentioned, it was blessed by God, can say, well, it's impossible this to be here. If we talk about Afghanistan, yes. In Turkey, yes, but not here, right? And I brought a small video that probably you are aware of, the Texas new bill that says that you should put the 10 Commandments in every school, right? And I'm not sure if this will be able to hear, but I will explain. Let's see if something.
Commandment.
Keep the Sabbath.
Okay, so let me.
Being here on Saturday, is that ironic or what?
So what does it mean to keep the Sabbath holy?
Well, I think it's. You want to get into theology here? I'd love to if you'd like to. I think it's really important that we take a day of rest. I think God, who founded the world, didn't need rest, and yet He took a day of rest after He did creation, and I think He was a good example to us to take a day of rest.
And so part of keeping the Sabbath holy is not working on the Sabbath?
That is, yeah.
What day is the Jewish Sabbath?
It is on Saturday.
And what day is it today?
It is Saturday. Here we are.
The Christian Sabbath is what day?
Sunday, in honor of the day that Jesus rose from the dead.
And we're scheduled to give this bill a final vote on what day of the week?
It's ironic, isn't it?
Would you be willing to postpone your bill so that we're not breaking the 10 Commandments by working on the Jewish or Christian Sabbath? We as a legislature are about to force every teacher in the state to post the 10 Commandments in their classrooms.
If they are
members
donated.
of the Texas legislature follow the 10 Commandments?
Is that about the bill?
Your bill is about the 10 Commandments.
Yes, it
I'm
is.
asking, do members of this legislature follow the 10 Commandments?
So again, this bill is about honoring our historical, educational, and judicial heritage with the displaying of the 10 Commandments.
The 9th commandment is thou shalt not bear false witness. Are you aware of any legislators who have lied about anything?
That is, you know, there might be one coming up in a minute. If you keep talking, we'll see.
The 7th commandment is thou shalt not commit adultery.
Yes.
Do you think that members of the legislature should focus more on trying to follow the 10 commandments rather than telling others to follow them?
Maybe they didn't have them posted. I am, you know, it is incumbent on all of us to follow God's law. And I think that we would be better off if we did.
Okay, so the point that I wanted to bring up from here, I don't know if you're able to listen much. So it was talking about the God's commandments, right? Is it wrong to force to have the 10 commandments somewhere? To look at them? No. But you see the people trying to make you keep the 10 commandments, they are breaking the 10 commandments. Like just the first thoughts, it says that what does the fourth commandment say? And they say, well, to keep the Sabbath holy, right? And what day was when they were talking? Saturday. So they were not keeping the Saturday holy. And then the guy was asking her, but what about the Christian Sabbath? Maybe you don't keep the Jewish Sabbath. Well, that's Sunday, in the honor of the resurrection of Christ. And then what they were supposed to do on Sunday? To work again. So that, even though it seems strange, this is recently, it's that was talking, and they are trying to think that they do God a favor when they actually break that law. And the same happened in heaven. If you remember, Satan, or Lucifer at that time, he was trying to promote the laws of heaven by breaking the laws of heaven. And the same it will be in this time of the end, when we will see that they will try to defend God's government in a way, to put the Ten Commandments in the school, to keep the Sabbath holy as the Christian Sabbath, as they call it, and by doing so, they try even to murder those that do not follow it. So let's come more into a biblical aspect out of it. As the defenders of truth refuse to honor the Sunday Sabbath, some of them will be thrust into prison, some will be exiled, some will be treated as slaves. And notice here it says that to human wisdom, all this now seems impossible, as I mentioned. It's a Christian country. But as the restraining spirits of God, Spirit of God shall be withdrawn from men, they shall be under the control of Satan, who hates the divine precepts, and there will be strange developments. Yes, we won't realize how they happen, but even though this country has a constitution, they will break that constitution thinking that they do God a service. So the promise or the assurance to the genuine Adventists, even though we will have to go to chapter 13 together, the promise is this, that even though that day is great, there is none like it. It is the time of Jacob's distress. What is the promise here? That Jacob will be saved from it. And when we think about Jacob, Jacob represents the people of God. The people of God in the time of the end. So when we think about him, Jacob being a man of victory, do you think that did he have to go through those two great crises that I mentioned about, man-made plague, and also living in the presence of God without a mediator? What do you think? Do you remember? That's true that he brought that plague upon him when he deceived his father, he deceived his brother. For many years, his brother was trying to take revenge of him, right? So that was the main. And let's read the verses. It's in Genesis chapter 32, and we read from verses 22 below. It says that, and he rose up that night. This is the time when he was coming towards his brother. His brother was coming with how many men towards him? Do you remember that story? Yes, with hundreds of soldiers in a way. Yes, to come to take revenge. And he says that he rose up that night and took his 2 wives, 2 women servants, and his 11 sons, and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them and set them over the brook, and sent over that he had. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled with him a man until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel, for as a prince thou hast power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And we'll see the continuation that the Lord blessed him there, and Jacob also called that name Peniel, because he had seen God face to face, and his life was preserved. So when we look at this history, how big was Jacob's family? Do you remember that? I already read something. How many children did Jacob have? 11, and also he had a daughter, right? And how many were with him when he wrestled with God? Verse 24, we read that. Let's go back to the verse. Okay. Yes, verse 24. It says that Jacob was left alone. So does it matter how many children we have? Does it matter how many friends we have in this final crisis? Yes, we says that he was left alone. And when we look at this, let me hear. There is a nice thought from Maranatha, page 197. It said that we shall find that we must let loose of all hands except the hand of Jesus Christ. Friends will prove treacherous and will betray us. Relatives deceived by the enemies will think that they do God a service in opposing us and putting forth the utmost efforts to bring us into hard places, hoping we will deny our faith. But we may trust our hand in the hand of Christ amid darkness and peril. So when you look at this, people are deceived. They think that they do God a service to betray you. And we look at many martyrs in the history. If we think about Tyndale, if we think about other great reformers, who betrayed them? It was their friends, people that they had confidence in them. And their friends didn't think that they betrayed their friend. They thought that they do God a service in presenting these people to those persecutors. So the same it will be in the end. Friends will prove treacherous and will betray us, but we may trust our hand in the hand of Christ amid darkness. And also, when we look at the steps or the preparation that we need to make in order to stand in this time of crisis, we see one of the greatest thought it was presented even today, that God's people preparing for this time of trouble, they will be a praying people or prayerful people. In Luke chapter 18, we see there are some good promises that we should memorize. Sometimes when we think that our prayers are not answered, it says that, "And shall not God avenge his own elect, which cry day and night unto him, though he bear long with them?" And verse 8 says that, "I'll tell you that he will avenge them speedily." Isn't this a wonderful promise? Shall not God avenge his own children that pray day and night? He says that, "I tell you that he will avenge them," or he will answer them, he will be with them right away, speedily. And that's why many times we find ourselves that we don't even have time to pray, right? It says that these thoughts from early writings that Satan is using every device in this sealing time to keep our minds, to keep the minds of God's people from the present truth and to cause them to waver. I saw a covering that God was drawing over his people to protect them in the time of trouble. What is this covering all about?
Seal.
The seal. I already mentioned in chapter 14 is the seal, right? The question in chapter 6, who shall be able to stand? Those that have this covering. So I saw that Satan is using every device in this sealing time to keep God's people to lose or to miss that covering. I saw a covering that God was drawing over his people to protect them in the time of trouble. And every soul that was decided on the truth and was pure in heart was to be covered with the covering of the Almighty. So those that have a covering, they are the ones that will be able to stand, and they are the ones that they will be able to sing the song of the Lamb and the song of Moses. And the next thought that here I see, it says that those who labor with their hands and those who labor in word and doctrine must have a care to sustain their physical powers. Satan and his evil angels are warring against them, seeking to undermine their strength. When they can, they should take rest both in body and mind, and should eat of nourishing food, for they will be obliged to use all the power they have. And I believe that's a blessing in a way that God gave us a day of rest. Yes, when God gave us the day of rest, He also thought of the rest that we need. So we won't say, well, I'm too tired today, I cannot come to church. Or I wake up so early in the morning, driving in through all the traffic that Brother Aaron mentioned, to work and back, and when I get back, try to pray, I fall asleep, if just thinking that I need to pray. And I'm sure that this happened to you, because it happened to me many times. We get exhausted that there is no time. But you notice here that this is when we get so exhausted, that is Satan's plan to keep our minds away from the present truth and to keep our minds away from praying that God may seal us and have that covering when the time of trouble is there. So when we overwork, we won't have time for prayer. And even if we have, we are too tired to even assimilate the words that we say. So God's people preparing for the time of trouble, they are praying people. And here we can include personal prayer. And just to give you a nice thought about personal prayer, I had this friend of mine that he was a doctor, he's still a doctor, and as every one of us have this custom that in the morning before we go, we pray. So this person woke up early, later than he thought, and he was thinking, like arguing or debating, should I pray? If I pray, I don't have time to catch the bus. If I don't pray, I catch the bus and maybe I pray as I go. So he decided, well, I'm gonna get the bus because I cannot afford to lose one day of work, right? So as he was going, the neighbor's gate was opened and the dog came and jumped on him and he was full of mud now. And now another debate, should I go to work? If I don't go, I'll be late, or I'll lose the today's wages. But how can I go with these clothes dirty, right? So then he went back, he changed, he realized that the bus passed, and he had time to pray. So when he got to his office there, all the coworkers were asking questions. How did you get here? And he was like, what do you mean, with the bus? And they said, well, the bus that you always take in the morning, it caught fire this morning. It was caught on fire. So you see, many times we shouldn't neglect the personal prayer time. We don't know what God is protecting us from, but one thing we know for sure, if we keep praying, we will have what? That covering in the time of trouble. And when we think about prayer, also there is the family prayer and also church prayer meeting. And the promise is, shall not God avenge his own elect? I tell you that he will avenge them speedily. And another lesson here we can take about prayer. When do we start to pray? We talked about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He was praying, pleading with God. When did he start praying? The Bible mentions also that after they had communion, then he went with his friends into the garden, right? We see that he, and also it mentioned also a little brook there. Do you remember the name? The brook name that they crossed over into the garden. Kedron, yes. So that's something amazing about that brook, because coming from school in the winter time, and probably Brother Aaron remembers that, just before Christmas, there will be a lot of sacrifices, pigs being killed. And many people, they do it in the middle of the road. Yes, in the middle of the street. And as you walk, you see a lot of blood. Probably you remember that. A lot of blood on the road. During the Passover, there were thousands of lambs being sacrificed in the courtyard of the temple. Where did all that blood go? The temple was on a hill, and the valley was the valley of Kedron, and all that blood would go where? To the brook. So what I'm trying to give you here, it's a visualized understanding that the crisis didn't start in the Garden of Gethsemane. As Jesus was crossing the brook, what did he see in that brook? For the disciples, it was just another year, another blood, but Christ could see that in a few hours, it was a matter of hours, his blood will be shed. So the crisis started even before his praying in the garden. When did he start praying for this crisis? We see yes, I mentioned already that he was praying, remove this cup from me. His friends did not support him, again like Jacob. His friends were sleeping, did not support him. And when did he start praying? In Mark chapter 1, verse 35, we see that in the morning, this was way before Gethsemane. In the morning, raising up a great while before the day, he went out and departed into a solitary place, and there he prayed. Yeah, so we don't have to wait for the crisis to come. We have to pray even before that. Because when crises come, what good? Probably we cannot even think of what to say in those crises. So Christ, he prayed even before that. What about Daniel? Do you remember the crisis, the big crisis in his life? What was it? Those who pray or send a petition to any other god except the king, they should be put where? Into the lion's den, right? And there is something amazing looking here. It says that now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber towards Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day. So this was after the petition was, where the bill was given. And he prayed and gave thanks before God. And notice the red words there. What does it say? As he did, what does it mean aforetime? Previously, as he was used to do it, right? So it's not just, oh, I have a crisis, now I have to pray. No, he was doing it before and all as a habit. And now, when the crisis came, it wasn't any different for him. He just prayed. So the same we see about Jacob. And here we see that that night of anguish represents the experience of God's people in the time of trouble. His only hope was in the mercy of God. His only defense must be prayer. But when did he start praying? That's the question that we should look at. So let's look here. Just one moment. Yes, right here. So God could not have heard his prayer and mercifully preserved his life. So it is in the time of trouble. If the people of God had unconfessed sins to appear before them while tortured with fear and anguish, they would be overwhelmed. Despair would cut off their faith, and they could not have confidence to plead with God for deliverance. But while they have a deep sense of their unworthiness, they will have no concealed wrongs to reveal. Their sins will have been blotted out by the atoning blood of Christ, and they cannot bring them to remembrance. So when we look at Jacob, he prayed, he wrestled with God. But this was his first time praying or wrestling with God? No. He said that he had to come before God at that time. How? Repented, right? So his sin had to be confessed when? Before that trial. Before that trial. So when we think about the steps, we shouldn't neglect the prayer. In the same time, we should be familiar with God's promises, because if we are not familiar, you don't know what to ask for. Like if you tell a child, like Levi, right now, he doesn't speak too much, but I tell him, let's go bye-bye, and he's at the door. And if I don't go right away, he's coming to take me because I promised him, right? So when we know the promise of God, then we can ask. If we don't know what he wants to do, we don't know what to ask, right? So how can we be familiar with his promises? It's by being familiar with his word. And then when we know the promises, we should be persistent. And here, when I talk about persistence, in Luke chapter 11, there is a well-known story that probably you are familiar with. It's talking about a friend going to ask bread from someone. Let's see if I have the verse here. Yes, here. It says that which of you shall have a friend and shall go with him unto him at midnight. So you know midnight. Do you like people coming or calling you at midnight? No. And say unto his friend, friend, lend me 3 loaves, lend me some bread. For a friend of mine is in his journey, is come to me, and I have nothing to set before him. And the friend from within, he says, trouble me not. The door is now shut. Sometimes we look, we see who's calling, and we either can deny it or leave the phone somewhere and call it back in the morning, right? He says, trouble me not. The door is now shut, and my children are with me in bed. If his children would be out, probably he would have the door unlocked, right? Those that were with him were those that were his, they were with him. And because of that, I cannot rise and give thee. And I say unto you, though he will not rise and give him, because he is his friend, yet because of his importunity, he will rise and give him as many as he needed. Do you know what that word importunity means? To be persistent. Yes, because even if you give up and you don't ask anymore, that friend, he goes back to sleep. But when you keep asking and asking and asking, he says, because of his importunity, not because it's your friend. Because of the importunity, because of his persistence, he will rise and give him as many as he needed. So coming back to these thoughts, do not neglect prayer. We should pray even before the crisis. And even as reformers, many times we get sick and then we become the best Christians. Everything goes well, we even forget to go back and thank God for healing, right? So we should not neglect prayer. We should prepare for that time of crisis. We should be familiar with the promises of God. We need to be persistent, and also, as I mentioned about Jacob, he had to repent before that final crisis came. Because at that time, God could not have heard his prayer if he had any sins that were not confessed. So the same it will be with us. It will be amazing just to know that, yes, I live in the presence of God without a mediator. And I know many Adventists, many times they argue this thought, saying that we can never be living a life in the presence of God without a mediator. And it's true. Right now, we know that sin cannot dwell in the presence of God. And the way I imagine it, many times we were baking eggplants on the fire outdoors, and the fire was so strong that we had to put a metal guard in between the fire, and also we can go there and work with those vegetables that we were roasting. So that is the work of Christ right now, to intercede in between us and God, so that we can stay alive. But remember the promise that when Christ shall come, we shall be like him, meaning sinless, meaning we can be in the presence of God without an intermediator, because we are holy like God. And when we think about that, having the sins confessed and forgiven, at least there is no conscience to keep us guilty as we have that time of trouble. And I'm telling you, Revelation 13, and I did not give you all the thoughts that the first beast did to the Christians. You remember, some of them were given to lions, some of them they were burned on stick. Thanks God, we won't go to that extent. But there will be the time when you cannot buy, you cannot drive, you cannot do whatever we enjoy today. You cannot, even being on the street will be illegal. So it will be amazing, at least to not have to worry about your conscience. So as a conclusion, when we think about the time of trouble, where the final crisis is not if it's gonna come someday. It is when it will come. And if it comes today, am I ready? So the points that we need to remember is to not forget prayer, to be familiar with God's promises, and this way we are anchored in Christ, and then confession, so the Lord may help us. And as the final thoughts here I have said that in the last great conflict, in the controversy with Satan, those who are loyal to God will see every earthly support cut off. And here, everything, like they charge for water, they charge for everything. There is no fee for air right now, but they might charge for that too. And all the earthly support will be cut off because they refuse to break his law in obedience to earthly powers. They will be forbidden to buy or sell. And Satan says that for fear of wanting food and clothing, they will join with the world in transgressing God's law. The earth will be wholly under my dominion. That's his plan in a way. But when we remember that Jacob, he prevailed because he was what? Yes. He knew the outcome, and he said, I won't let you go until you bless me. His target was the blessing. His experience testifies the power of importunate prayer. It is now that we are to learn this lesson of prevailing prayer, of unyielding faith. And another thought we should remember that there will be no time then to do it, and no mediator to plead their cause before the Father. Before this time, the awfully solemn declaration has gone forth that he that is unjust, let him be unjust still, and he which is filthy, let him be filthy still, and he that is righteous, let him be righteous still, and he that he is holy, let him be holy still. So in other words, now that we still have the time of grace, and I was sharing with Sister Tabitha that as long as there is still heartbeat, there is still hope. Now is the time of salvation that we have to worry about. And besides of it, we should remember that at that time, you may have, I'm not counting how many we are here, but in that day you will be alone. It doesn't matter how many friends you have. In that day, we will be alone. But the promise that is given is that he will be saved from it. And it's amazing, as I started with the wonderful promise that said that in the midst of this great crisis, what happened? People of God stand without a mediator, they can sing, and I tell you that you won't be able to sing if your house is burning right now. It's impossible. But at that time, we will have God's protection, and all this earthly, as I mentioned, Revelation 13, the man-made plagues will not touch us. And here we see also in the time of Jacob, remember that he had the angel to worry about, and also he had his brother to worry about, right? There were two great crises in his life. What happened when Esau met Jacob? Do you remember that? Yes, he says the Bible mentions that he ran to him, Esau, that was coming to kill him. He ran to him, he hugged him, he kissed him, and he cried. Yes. In other words, even this earth, even though it seems like everything is cut off from us, it won't be able to touch us. Angels of God will be there to protect us. And above all this, we will have the peace with God. And the final verse, Amos 4:12, therefore thus will I do unto thee, O Israel. So the promise was, what will God do to us? That Jacob will be saved from it. Jacob, Israel is the same person, right? And because I will do this unto you, prepare to meet thy God, O Israel. So may the Lord help us that we may take advantage of this time of preparation. Because the promise that Christ gave us in Matthew 24, that he that shall endure until the end, he shall be saved. So may the Lord help us that we may be part of this wonderful picture, because as we look, the crisis, it's not the end. The end, it's what is beyond that crisis. And it would be amazing that we all may be there. And